Good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're listening. I'm so glad you're here. I have Kim with me today, and I'm so excited to learn from someone who's been in our profession for 40 years. You wrote a book to highlight your experience as a nurse, and I'm excited to discuss what led to you writing a book, the process of publishing, and what exactly your book is about. During our discussion, you mentioned that we don't all eat our young because you've experienced that side of things. And I'm excited to talk about your endeavors to change that. I have a feeling that one of your driving forces, and I can't wait to hear all about it. So if you have anything you'd like to add to our introduction, Kim, please feel free.
Well, first of all, Chelsea, thank you so much. And I'm very excited to be here and have this opportunity. In 40 years, I was exposed to a lot and I've learned a lot. And if there's anything I can do to help our new nurses and our nursing students, I'd like to. And that's the reason for the book, is I was hoping that maybe I can help something. But I'm very excited. And for you nursing students and people listening out there, thank you all so much for being one of us. We're very excited.
Absolutely. We need every single one of them, right?
Absolutely. And more.
And whoever wants to join in, please.
That's right. Please do.
So tell us about your 40-year career in a nutshell.
Well, so I never really knew that I wanted to be a nurse. I was as a nurse's aide for 4 summers, because it was a place close to me. I loved working with older people. And so when it came time to go to college, I thought, go to nursing school. So I did. And I happened to click into a wonderful facility that actually had an internship program back in 1985, long before the internship programs like today. That was a different internship program. And I'm going to speak about that just a little bit because it was so unique. We did a week worth of study, like book studies, movies, all sorts of learning activities. And then you went 3 weeks into that specialty. So we did like a neuro specialty, we did a pediatric specialty, a newborn specialty, cardiac. We did 6 different specialties. So I was in an intense internship for 6 months, which gave me a great foundation. So I actually picked neuro ICU, which is an amazing area to work in, and I learned so much. And then from there, I eased into administration. But whenever I was ready to move on from ICU, not because I didn't like it, not because it was a bad thing, it was just time to move on. I went from there to outpatient, from outpatient to PACU, from PACU to wound care, and then back to outpatient. But through each of those, I would be a staff nurse for like 6 months to a year, and then I would go into management. And I loved management, but I thought it was important as a manager to make sure that I knew what my staff was going through. That's just my personal opinion, that as a nurse manager, if I understand when somebody says, oh my gosh, I got 2 patients back to back, if I don't know what that means, then I don't know how to help them. So that was an important piece of the puzzle. And I keep threatening to retire. I've actually retired 2 or 3 times, but nursing keeps drawing me back, especially now in the middle of the pandemic. I want to do what I can to help. So I'm actually back part-time, still at the same hospital, Tallahassee Memorial, and I'm doing the pre-op COVID testing. We're still able to do surgeries at this point. And so I'm actually doing a week pre-op COVID test about a week before they actually have surgery. A lot of people think that's to protect the nurses. It's not. It's not to protect the staff. It's to make sure that the patient does not have COVID and then wind up having a surgical procedure as well. So that's it. That's me.
I love that. I love that you were in a training program that is very similar to our residency programs that actually haven't been around that long. You were like the pioneer institution probably for these residency programs that are so coveted in today's time. So that's so cool. I love it. Shelby asked one of my favorite questions. In your 40 years of healthcare, what has been the most profound change you've been a part of?
Well, for those that are around my age and have been in it, the most profound change, of course, is technology. And as nurses, folks, it was the computer. I was there when we had, remember the old Pong games where the kids don't, but there used to be a Pong game and it was just one little thing on the screen, a game that you played. Okay. Well, that's what our first computer named Oscar looked like. One little line would come up and you would type on that line, and that was it. That was all that was on your screen. You couldn't look up anything. You could just order it. So the evolution of the computer in our world and what we're able to do on it and how we're able to pull from everywhere, I think that in itself is the most amazing change. Of course, the technology, most of my specialty has been around surgery or pre-surg or PACU. The technology advances just from going back when I worked in Dr. Neuro and seeing that a patient that had a craniotomy actually had to stay in the ICU for 5 or 6 days. Now some cranies procedures go home the next day. Yeah. That's amazing to me. So just that progression is just fascinating to me.
Yeah. I interviewed another nurse who had been, I think she had around 40 years experience, and she was a NICU nurse. And she said the most profound change was the evolution of the pulse ox. And I thought, oh my gosh, yes, I can. How would I have done my job without a pulse ox? And she did it just fine. So I love hearing those stories. That's one of my favorite questions to ask our super seasoned nurses. It's amazing to me. Shelby also asked another great question.
2 weeks ago. Oh, excuse me.
No, please go ahead.
2 weeks ago, I was able to do a COVID test on a nurse that was 94 years old. She had worked for 70 years. Oh. Think about that. I asked her that same question. I said, what has changed the most for you? Her answer flipped me out. She said, we don't have to sharpen our own needles anymore. Think about that.
Yes, that nurse actually shared that as well. Or cleaning the syringes. I thought,
we wouldn't even think about that because we're so far past that, but that's how we have evolved out. So
it's amazing. Amazing. Okay, so Shelby asked another great question. She said, what do you miss most about healthcare that no longer exists?
I don't know for me personally that there's anything that's missing. I've had the opportunity to move from one area to the next and learn from so many different people, and everything has, I felt like, improved. Do I think anything has taken us backwards? Maybe, but nothing really comes to mind that I miss. But I will say this. In the Dr. Neuro, of course, that's my first experience was the Dr. Neuro group. That group every year would rent a beach house. I'm in Florida, and we're really close to a place called St. George Island. And we would rent a beach house for 2 weeks, and we would make arrangements so the entire team could come down over time and interact and get together and spend time together outside of the hospital, an extended time. And we don't seem to do that anymore. I'm not sure why. I don't know if life just got busy or because we would bring kids and everything. So that is one thing I miss. It didn't evolve out. Life changed, and so that changed. But we used to really spend a lot of time together outside of work, and I find that with my most recent teams, we're not doing that as much. I don't think it's because we don't like each other, or I think life is just getting in the way, especially right now with COVID. So
that's true. That sounds like a nice tradition. And that would really create some unity in our professions. I feel like now you might lose that because people don't typically stay put like they did at one time. People tend to change around quite a bit. And so I wonder if that has anything to do with it.
Probably because you don't develop who you work with. There'll always be a connection, even if it's just for a couple of years. I find I still have connections with those people, but it is different. Because of, if you've worked with somebody 5, 6, 7 years, I think it's different. It's, but we could probably do that if we worked harder at it. But again, life is so busy right now, and you go home and you're exhausted. We used to all go out after work and get something to eat, depending on which shift, get breakfast if you were night shift or whatever, but you just don't have time. You've got to go and, you have to go home and get everything done. So that's one thing that life has just evolved, but it wasn't that anybody set out to change. Just sort of kind of happened.
Yeah. So what's your greatest accomplishment in nursing?
The PACU unit that I worked in as a head nurse, I worked first as a year, just learning PACU because that's what I wanted to do. And then I was asked to take the nurse manager position. Okay. One of my strong points is reading people. And so the team that we had there in PACU was absolutely amazing. That they were like family. They were really close knit. They looked out for each other. And as a manager trying to figure out a schedule, I didn't have to figure it out. Somebody would say, oh, I need tomorrow off. Somebody would say, hey, I've got it for you. Somebody else would say, hey, I need to switch my Christmas vacation. So I didn't build that team, but I was blessed to be a part of that team, and I had my own contributions to it.
Mhm.
So as a head nurse, being able to figure out which staff members, the new staff members hiring coming in would help, where they would fit best on the unit. Because an example, I had a brand new GN, which a lot of places won't take new nurses. I do. I think they're great, and I think we can teach them so much, and they can learn from the area that they're at. But that's just my opinion. But we would bring them in. Well, if she would fit better on the 3 to 11, but I had this wonderful 15-year experienced nurse that had PACU experience. So they're like, which one are you going to hire? I said, I'm going to hire the new GN or RN, because she's going to fit in better with that group of people. That was my accomplishment, was being able to read people and help build the team. Again, the head nurse director is just a piece of the puzzle. But I was so happy that we all worked together. That was a very good accomplishment. We had a waiting list of people trying to get in to work with us. We had like less than a 5% turnover rate. We had these amazing numbers because we were such a tight group. Again, we didn't go out after work or stay best friends outside of work, but in work, we were very, very molded. And I was very proud to be a part of that.
That's an amazing accomplishment. So I want us to get to your book, but I feel like these questions really shape and mold what we're going to get to see in the book a little bit. So there's only 2 more. So those of you that are tuned in and you're like, come on, let's get to the book. We're getting there. We're learning about Kim so that we can really get a feel for where she's coming from as an author. So you've worked in a variety of specialties. What would you say is your favorite? And I have a feeling, just based on your personality, that there was something you liked about everything. So it's going to be probably hard for you to decide. But maybe just your favorite and why maybe you would recommend it to somebody else.
Each unit that I worked in was absolutely my new favorite. Whether when I started off in Vector Neuro, I thought I would be, you're right, I thought I would be there forever. And then the opportunity presented itself for outpatient, and then the opportunity presented itself for PACU. And I absolutely love them all because they all taught me something different. But PACU would be my love, and here's why. That is such an amazing area, and I think it's a great area for new nurses because your ratio is 2 to 1. Mm-hmm. You have adults you have pediatrics all the way up through adults. You have very healthy patients to very sick patients. You have ICU patients. The new technology I was talking about with different procedures and stuff, you see that, those procedures post-op. You see somebody that normally would be in ICU on a vent come in and they're awake talking to you and, oh, no, I'm not really hurting that bad. So PACU gives you so much of a variety, but it also gives you very sick patients. The other cool thing is most PACUs are built as a large open unit. So you're never by yourself. No matter what's going on, you're right there. The other piece of the puzzle is your anesthesia team. Mm-hmm. Is most of the time somebody's in the room with you or they're right outside and you call overhead. I used to laugh because you had to be careful. If you wanted a specific doctor, you needed to page him and say, just call when you get a chance. Because if you said, please come to PACU and you said stat or now or anything, people would just come from everywhere because they were so concerned about the patients there. They wanted to make sure we had what we needed. And again, that was a great team environment because you had help immediately. And sometimes, you wanted your doctor to come back and look and you're like, something's not right, but you don't quite have the information yet to know your vitals are fine, everything's okay. But, with that nursing instinct, as y'all become nurses and get experience under your belt, you'll realize that there's a nursing instinct. Listen to that. That's going to tell you a lot because something's just not right. And then you want the doctor to come. And then sometimes you catch things way before you would have if you just waited for something to come up that you could tell the doctor about. Your doctors will respect you. They'll listen. And that's an important piece of that puzzle as far as teamwork is that you're their eyes. You're at the bedside. Everything was fine back there, but now what's actually going on? So PACU really was my love. And the other thing, patient satisfaction. I'm hurting. You had pain medicine. Their blood pressure's up, you give them medicine. It was an instant relief to be able to help take care of your patients.
I love that. So this question is interesting, but what's the biggest mistake you made in your career, and what did you do moving forward to ensure that that mistake never happened again?
So I'm going to tell you guys, you're going to make mistakes. And that's part of why I wrote the book, is to tell you things that I did. There are several things in the book that I tell you about that I wish I had done differently. But I think after all these years, there are a lot of mistakes I could talk on, but I'm going to talk about my first one that is in the book, but also I won't tell you the whole thing in case you've already read it. But I gave Tagamet to the wrong patient.
Okay.
Now, as a brand new GN, as soon as I gave it, I told the other RN, I was a GN at this point, and I told the other RN, and she goes, no big deal. And I'm like, I just killed my patient. It wasn't. It was an NG Tagamet medication. We didn't have, I don't even remember if we had armbands or not, folks. I'm sure we had to, but I took my meds and I went into the wrong room, and I put Tagamet down an NG tube and realized in the next room it was the wrong one. I thought I was going to be, I thought I'd killed the patient. I thought I was going to be fired. I thought my career was over. My biggest horror had just come true. Tagamet, as you know, is not going to kill the patient. The patient probably needed it anyway because they were on an NG tube and maybe it just wasn't time. But the reason why I bring that one up is because we are all human. You have all sorts of devices now and processes that you follow to make sure that it's the right patient, right dose, right time. And it's very important to follow those. It's a safety measure. I became obsessed with checking and double checking and triple checking. But as we moved into the computer world, that gives you double, triple, the ability to double check everything as to what you're doing. Don't rely on your machines because your patient's going to tell you what's going on. If your machines are telling you that the patient's fine, but the patient doesn't look fine, of course you need to listen to your patient. Computers can only do so much. They don't take away the human capacity of ours to look and see what's really going on, but they actually do help you in the form of limiting errors and mistakes. And so back in 1985, I think it was June 4th, I gave a Tagamet to the wrong patient, and that it rocked my world. Having a mistake, I'd only been a GN, I'd only been on the floor for maybe 2 or 3 months. So as strange as it sounds, so I'm not saying I didn't make other mistakes, but that was the one that just rocked my world because, oh my gosh, you've given the wrong bed to the wrong patient. So that was it.
And knowing you for this short amount of time, your humility just shines. And I can almost guarantee you that you shared this mistake ad nauseum to your new orientees and those that you precepted, because in sharing that prevents them from doing the same thing. So essentially, you're teaching them through the mistakes that you've made so that they don't have to have that same stumbling block and do the same thing you did. And I would encourage all of you to do the same thing. If you make a mistake, wave a flag. I made a mistake. Everybody learn with me and, for the sake of our patients. And yeah, I'm going to read your book. I can't wait to read it.
Well, let me tell you one other situation that happened that was scary. We'll keep it short. Central line using 1,000 units of heparin to 1 cc to flush it with. There was a mix-up. The nurse that was working, the anesthesia person that was working with the doctor thought he wanted the 2,000 to 1. They flushed all 3 central lines with the 2,000 to 1. When we got that patient in the recovery room, she was bleeding out of her tear ducts. She was bleeding everywhere. We quickly realized the mistake, gave the med to make sure we counteracted it, and we told the family. Everybody's like, why did you tell the family? I'm like, because you don't hide anything. They know we're human. They know we make mistakes. You need to always be upfront. And I'm very fortunate in my hospital, and I hope everybody is, that our hospital looks at processes and issues as to why it happened. They don't say, Kim, you made a mistake, or this is your fault. They're like, tell us what happened. Tell us what we can do to keep it from happening. So don't be afraid. Do everything you can to not make the mistake. Follow what's there. but learn from it. If it's something that happened that was just a fluke accident, figure out what can we do, work with them for the process. I'm sorry, you're going to feel horrible. I think we all do when you make the mistake. But what I didn't say, which I'll say now, is when I went in and told my head nurse that morning, I had cleaned out my locker with the Tagamet. I thought I was fired. I thought I was gone, and I'm crying. And she said, "Did the patient die?" And I'm like, "Well, no, but no, she didn't die, but I know I'm fired." And she goes, "No, learn from it and move on." And she said, "I'll see you tonight." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So, a lot of people, we're not out to get you, meaning experienced nurses, your nurse managers, we're not out to get you. People make mistakes. We're human.
Yep.
And that's okay. Just make sure you learn from it.
Yeah. Come to the table with, I've made this mistake and this is my plan to never do that again. Right?
Right.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Now we get to get into like writing the book. All right. I'm excited. So have you always had a passion for writing?
I guess I have, but I didn't know it. I have a daughter, and I wanted to talk about my childhood. So I made a children's series about a horse that I used to have. So I actually have a children's series that's written, and I also have a mystery book that's written. I just never bothered publishing them, but I'm going to tell on myself. As y'all can tell, I like to talk. I enjoy talking. So guess what? Writing is a way to talk and not be interrupted, because you just put everything down that you want to and nobody's saying anything to you, and you just keep saying exactly what you want to say. Then the editors get a hold of it, and that's a different ballgame. But yes, I do enjoy writing. I do enjoy a bunch of different things. So yes, I've always enjoyed it. And so the opportunity, when I told my niece wanted to become a nurse, and folks, I really was scared. Here I was 39 years maybe as a nurse. And my little niece was going to nursing school. Her name's Casey, and she is who the book was written to. Oh. And I wanted to tell her so much. So I started writing letters to her to say, "Casey, this is going to happen and this is going to be all right. And watch out for this, but here's what you can do to prepare for it." Not really a warning. I said, watch out, but just things that's going to happen in nursing school. We all know you can talk to any experienced nurse and they remember nursing school. They remember taking the boards. It's just a part of our world that we all dealt with, and we all felt the same way that y'all do, being where you are. We remember being in nursing school. And so I wanted to protect Casey. So I started writing these letters. Somebody recommended that I put it in the form of a book. And so that's what I did.
Awesome. So you already answered the next question, so I'm going to move on.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So what did you want to accomplish in writing it in book form? So it's not just to Casey, it's to, what was your purpose?
One of my favorite things as a nurse manager was working with leadership students. I got to work with a lot of leadership students in their last semester of school. I also got to work with a lot of students in their final semester, whatever that was. And I wanted to try, I would find that instead of taking them out on the unit with me, I'd want to talk to them about, well, what is it you want to do? Where do you think you want to go? Mm-hmm. Trying to help them answer some of the questions. And so with the book, I'm hoping that nursing students and new nurses can look at what I recognize as my mistakes and things that happened to me, and funny stories and stories that aren't so funny. And try to let them know that it's okay, whatever you're feeling. In some of those stories, I actually end up angry, and I'm angry on the inside because you can never show it to patients. The adage that patients are always right is correct, but that doesn't mean the nurse is wrong. So that's a fine tune to play. So whenever I've written some of the stories, it's to help with that part, that you are so angry and so upset, and the patient's always supposed to be right, but they're not right in that instance. But you've got to figure out how to work that. And if I could take any of my experiences and help the new nurses learn something or get information that might help them one time in their career, then I've accomplished something with the book. Because if I can do anything to help. Nursing's hard, folks. You already know that. Nursing school's hard. It deals with your emotions. You've got to have the knowledge. You've got to learn to deal with angry people. You come in a room and somebody's angry and you've done absolutely nothing, but you don't know what the story is behind their anger. And usually there is almost always a story. And in the book, there's several of those where I say that I walk in the door and get blasted. And then throughout the story, you find out what was going on. I find out why, and I share with y'all why, what was going on and what was behind the story. And then you find that it's really sad, or it's really amazing, or it all makes sense.
Connecting with our patients definitely gives us a different level of satisfaction in our job, from my perspective. And I agree with you that the side that you see sometimes come through this lens of anger, frustration. It's always aimed at the person that they see the most, that they don't have a direct relationship with, right? And I love that you point out that if you take long enough to connect with them and realize the why behind whatever emotion that's being lashed out at you, I feel like you're a happier nurse because you get to the bottom of that issue, and instead of being the target, now you can really get a feeling that you're on their side and they get it now. And I just love that. And that's why you've been in this field for 40 years, and why you're writing a book to help those of us that need that helping and stepping stone along the way. And I appreciate you for taking the time to do that.
Thank you. One thing I'd like to say, folks, remember, nurses have been around forever. And I would say for most people, nurses are their safety net. They feel safe with you. They may be angry with you, or take things out on you. It's really not about you, but it's almost a compliment, because they feel comfortable with you. They feel like, you've got their life in their hands, and that you're bringing their pain medicine, you're bringing their food, you're bringing all this stuff, but they still feel comfortable enough to say something to you, or to be angry to you, and not to be afraid that you're going to retaliate. That's trust, folks. That's the fact that your patients trust. It's not, I don't like to use the word fair. It's not right that they abuse that in some ways, but we have to remember almost all of our patients are in some type of crisis mode. Some maybe, even they're coming in for a gallbladder. That's not a big deal to us, but that may be a huge deal for them, because maybe they lost a family member under anesthesia 15 years ago, and they don't know the whole story. So it's like, hey, what's wrong? You're just getting a gallbladder. So you never really know what their whole story is.
Very true. I like to liken our patients to toddlers sometimes. They're so well behaved when they're out of your care as a parent. And then in your care as a parent, they've got the full-blown terrible 2s, terrible 3s going. They don't act like that with other people. Why do they act like that with me? And sometimes parents get offended that grandma is like, you act like that when I'm around. Well, it's because they trust you, and they know that you love them, and they love you. And so they know you can take it. So I agree. Take it as a compliment. So let's talk about one of your favorite stories in the book.
One of my favorite stories is probably also one of my saddest stories.
Okay.
We had a gentleman who was shot, and right in the forehead, for a robbery type instance. And we didn't think he was going to make it. He should not have made it. Again, this was 85 years ago, and the technology was not what it was. And the doctor said, we don't give him much. 2 days later, the gentleman woke up, and he was talking just like you and I are. He was absolutely fine. But he had no inhibitions. Part of the brain that was damaged, that was actually removed, he had no inhibitions. And it turned him into like a 7-year-old little boy. Absolutely wonderful, friendly, always nice, but he had no inhibitions. And sometimes I'll tell you this, the whole story's in the book, but I'll tell you the part that just absolutely cracked me up. I would lean over to listen with my stethoscope, and he would reach up, and I'd be like, Bill, and he'd be like, ma'am. I'm like, don't do that. Okay, but they're soft. And I'm like, so, some people may be very offended by that, or some people may have, like freaked out, not freaked out, but, been very uncomfortable with that, because it was a 56-year-old man, but you had to look at it. This gentleman his world had changed, and he was like a little boy. No, little boys aren't supposed to be doing that either, but he didn't mean anything by it. There was no undercurrent. There was no like, oh, let me pretend that, I'm messed up and do things. He was constantly doing things. And it did bother some of the other nurses, but I loved taking care of that patient because when I walked in the room, he'd be like a little kid, so excited to see me. The sad part of the story is it was actually one of his family members that shot him. But you will see a lot of miracles of amazing things, whatever label you as an individual want to put on them. But the miracle with this gentleman was he never remembered or never found out that it was one of his family members. He just didn't have the capacity to comprehend that. Even though he was completely there, he went home and was fine. But you talk about life being changed forever. This man looked absolutely fine, but his family had to take this 56-year-old person, I think he was in his 50s, home, but he acted like a 7-year-old. If he saw something, he'd say, he would say something inappropriately. If he saw something, he just had no shield whatsoever. And so it was very, very sad and very hard for the family, but I had absolutely loved taking care of that patient and loved going in with him every day. And so there's going to be so many amazing stories. There's going to be so many people that touch your heart. There's going to be so many people that hurt your heart, not on purpose, but just heartbreaking situations. But, your job is to try to do the best that you can and try to figure out how the best way for you to deal with it. And then that in turn will help you figure out the best way to help the patient deal with it, because you're going to see things that I still see things to this day that I have a hard time dealing with. But my job is to figure out how to deal with it so that I can help the patients, because it's not happening to me, it's happening to them. And my job is to help them.
Absolutely. So how did you go about vetting an editor and a publisher to get this book to print?
So there's 1,000 different ways to do it. If you're interested in writing, the first thing I would say is sit down and write. Don't make yourself write. Don't say, some people, I'm going to quote a famous author, not Dean Koontz, but who's Stephen King. Yep. Stephen King says, if you're going to write, do it full time and depend on money for that. That doesn't work for me. And he insisted on writing every day. For me, I'll think of a story and I'll go in and I'll sit down and I'll write it. My stories they're not really short stories, but the book itself is a book that you can pick up and you can read chapter 1, chapter 8, chapter 3, chapter 11. You don't have to read them in order to understand the book. They all pretty much stand alone. So they're short stories, for lack of a better word. So if something comes to my mind that I remember and I'm like, oh, that would really help Casey when she has this issue or whatever. And so I'll go and sit down and write it. So write when you want to, write what you want to, write exactly your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, whatever they are, put them down. And then the editing, the publishing, all of that is a huge problem. If you want to do it, absolutely start looking. You can go online and do research and find private editors, private formatters. You can find businesses that have the entire production under one. You can publish a book for $1,000, or you can pay somebody $80,000. The whole gamut is there. So it's really hard to tell you what to do. But the one thing that I would say is, if you like to write, get it on paper, because they can't do anything with it till you get it. So don't I don't know how I'd get it edited, or I don't know how I would get it published, or I don't know if I would have the correct words and spellings and all that stuff. Don't worry about that. It's the feelings, the emotions, and the situations. Get that on paper, and then you can find somebody else. I wish I had a better way to explain it to you as far as a quick way to go to get it published. But that's really, writing is the easy part, but it's the main part. So you got to make sure you get that down first, and then start doing your research. And like I said, there's companies out there that'll do the whole thing for you. And they'll walk you through each step. That's going to cost you some money. But there's also editors that will edit your entire book for $500, $1,000. So just start writing. That's my number one thing. Start writing. That's the way to get a book published, is to start writing and then start pitching it. And I'll tell you some advice that somebody gave me that has been very helpful but surprising. Don't let your family and friends read the book, because they are either going to be horribly truthful with you or horribly nice to you, and you don't want either one of those. Yeah. If you're writing something, there are writing groups all over the place. get involved in those. They will be honest with you. They'll give you feedback. They also have the ins and outs of where to go, who to contact, and how to get in touch with certain people. So your local writing groups are really important. But what I want to say to you first is write whatever you think or feel. Put that down, and then you can get somebody later to help you with it. Go for it. Highly recommend it.
Right. So we had another nurse guest on. He is a nurse in pediatric oncology. Sorry, it took me a second. My synapses weren't firing very well. And he had written and edited his book, and it took him quite a while to find somebody to publish it for reasonable. Did you feel like you ran into that roadblock as well?
Absolutely. Very, very easily to get it edited, very easily. Well, I'm going to use a number, and I don't mean this is more, less, or whatever. It's just a number. But let's say that you get your book edited and formatted for $5,000, because just like there are new writers out there, there's new editors out there, there's new format people out there. Local colleges are a great place to do some research for editing and formatting.
Okay.
Your publisher is your hard job. Sometimes you just have to make the decision as to invest in yourself. If it's an important, for me, this was important because I have the hope that it will help nursing students, that it'll help people with the transition. So for me, it was something that I wanted to invest in. But for some people, if it's a mystery book, that's, mysteries are also very important too, because people love to read that, and books are a way for me to take my mind off of what's going on right now. It's a way to disappear and travel and hear other people's thoughts and situations, regardless of whether it's fiction or nonfiction. But publishing is going to be your hardest. Some people say, oh, do I need a agent? I don't have an agent. I did the all-in-one thing. So you really, that's going to be your hard part, is the publishing part. But writing it, don't let any of that stop you from writing it. Get it written, and then you'll move through, and you'll start making contacts, and you'll get it to the right place, and you'll figure out what you need to do, and it'll happen. There's no magic way. I wish there was like, if somebody's hurting you, go get morphine. Well, I wish it was that simple, but it's not. But what's important is to start it. You can't publish a book unless you've written it. So I can't say that enough. And you'll find you have to keep working. It's not easy. This is a process. This particular book is a 2.5 year, 3 year process. Only took me about 6 months to write it, because I was probably up every night writing to Casey. And by the way, how about this? And here's another story, because there was just so much I wanted to tell her. But the publishing and that part of it takes a lot. But it's worth it. If that's your dream, you need to follow it.
Delphina said Casey's a lucky girl.
Thank you.
So do you plan actually, I'm going to ask you one more thing before we get to that question. How do you vet whether your book is worth publishing? How do you get it in front of enough eyes, maybe in like a Facebook group of writers, but then they don't have the same relational audience as new nurses? How do you vet that your writing is worth publishing?
That was one of my big questions. And with this particular book, because I have those 3 other books that are sitting out there. Why haven't I published them yet? Oh, are they good enough? I don't know. To me, my own opinion matters. Nobody may ever read it, but I think you really are writing it for yourself. I wrote, and I don't mean that bad. I'm just saying I wanted to tell Casey this. Maybe we need to interview Casey and say, Casey, did you want to hear it? So, that hasn't come up yet, but she was so excited, and she was very positive about it. But for me, I at least put it out there so that somebody else could decide whether it was the right one. That's a hard question. I'm going to go back to another author. J.K. Rowling went in front of 5 publishers before she ever published her book. I did some research on her. And think about that, folks. That's amazing. 4 people turned it down. Yeah. And look what that one book did. So don't be discouraged if somebody doesn't like it. You may not have the right venue or be in the right place for what it is that you need to do that. So yes, I have those other books that I haven't published yet, but right now it's just because I'm busy with this book, and I'm actually writing a second book to this, again, because I have more stories I'd like to tell Casey as far as further along in my career, and I keep coming up with memories in that new transitional stage. Somebody said, oh, it's about 40 years worth of your experience. And I'm like, no, it seems like I keep writing about the first 2 or 3 years, because that was the most dramatic change for me. That was my learning curve. That was my, the time that was so dramatic, and having to learn and adjust everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So don't know if that answers the question very good, but just write it down, and you'll figure it out. But it truly, if your book entertains one person, maybe we're not going to sell millions like J.K. Rowling did, but oh my gosh, if you make a difference with somebody, and again, let's go back, your writing groups, your local writing groups, Facebook, there are a lot of people out there writing. There's a lot of people out there published. And one of the things I love about the authors that I have met is they're willing to help me. They're willing to give me ideas. They're willing to tell me, gracefully that my baby is, you might need to work on this little part a little bit. So, and that is one thing I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys. When you have this book ready, it is the greatest book ever, because it's your baby. It's like your child. It's like, I don't know what to explain it as, but when I handed that over to an editor, I was horrified, because what if they don't like it? What if they change everything? What if they say it's wrong? So go in it, write what you want, and with the idea that if you change one person's life, if you make one person smile, if you make one person happy, if you keep one person in suspense, go in with that goal and see what happens. And I think you'll be surprised. I think you'll find that since it mattered to you, there'll be other people that it mattered to as well.
So let's talk about, you say $5,000 was the number that you threw out there for editing and publishing. If you're hoping to get that back at some point, right? And we're going to talk about where we can find your book as well. But do you find that it's a good financial investment to become an author?
I'll let you know.
Okay.
So I'm just now starting out. I made a decision as to what my amount was, what I was comfortable, what my budget, we'll call it a budget.
Okay.
Once you get your baby written, edited, and formatted, and you've gotten feedback from local writers, you've gotten feedback from your editor and not your publisher, your editor and your format person. Once you get that information and that feedback, you'll have a pretty good idea, because they're not going to say, oh, here, let me give you money and you go publish it, if it's not good. So finding the publisher is the harder part. Some people are fortunate enough that the publisher says, here, I'll give you royalties, and then I'm going to publish it. That's what happens with J.K. Rowling. But remember, J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, all those people were just like us. They started with something that mattered to them, and they wrote about it. It depends on where you are in your life. I hate not giving y'all specific answers, folks, because I really am at the beginning of this process. I think I've sold, thanks to you guys, I think I've sold 300 books, which I'm thrilled about. That's 298 more than I thought. I figured Casey would have one, and I figured my mom would have one. So I knew I would have at least 2 out there. But so it may appeal, it may take off, it may not. Make sure you're writing the book. Again, if it's a fiction or whatever, write it because it's what makes you happy. And then the editor and everybody will fill in. And then you have to decide as far as how much you can budget, how much you're willing to put in, how much time as well to hit those publishers, if you want to find an agent, there's several different ways. I wish I had the magic answer, but I don't, but I hope that's given you some idea. The main thing I want to keep saying to you is don't give up. If you have it, try it, but figure out in your mind what your budget is, what you can spend, if you have the money to spend, if you can do that and make that investment, especially in a book that you think will make a difference, like a nonfiction book, that's something that happened to you or something that you're writing about like that. I'm going to go with nursing experiences, saying that I hope that my book will make a difference for new nurses and nursing students. And I also have found out in my reviews, I've been pleasantly surprised. The best feedback that I have gotten, folks, is from my non-medical people. They love seeing what it's like for us on the other side. They assume we're sitting at the nurses station drinking coffee and talking. But when we talk about some of our episodes like this, instead of that, some of people are like, wow, we had no idea that that could be what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Some days we are sitting down having a cup of coffee if we have time, but most days we're not. And so being able to give them the different scenarios that's going on. One of the chapters, I think it's called A Glass of Water. Can't remember what I titled it. No, I remember what I titled it, but it's about a glass of water. That's all one patient wanted, was a glass of water. But I had 3 other patients. One's lung was collapsing because he'd just come back from a lung biopsy. One was dying. She'd just gotten her cancer diagnosis and was given like 2 months to live. And one was in the middle of a psych break. Those were my 4 patients. Staff was helping. Everybody was on the plate. But my 1 patient was a post-op patient, and all she wanted a glass of water. And at one point during the day, she told me I was the worst nurse she'd ever had. So that is a hard thing, folks, somebody needs pain medicine, somebody needs water, somebody needs to go to the bathroom, and somebody's lungs collapsing. You can't do it all. Even if you have your techs, and that's something I haven't said yet that I want to make sure, and I know you'll help me cover it, but it takes all of us. It takes your secretaries. It takes the supply people. It takes environmental services, the food services. We can't do our job, none of us, without each other. All of us need each other. And even when all hands are on deck, y'all know sometimes it's absolutely crazy and you still can't get to and do all the things that you'd really like to. So that's a memory that I still hold. That's probably from about 20, 25 years ago. Because I couldn't get her water, I was the worst nurse ever. And I agree with her, because that's all she wanted was a glass of water. And you can't say, oh, well, I'm sorry, but I have somebody dying. Your water's just going to have to wait. You'll say, okay, I'll get it to you as soon as I can. And with best intentions, you're still dealing with the other situations. So,
yeah. So tell us where we can find your book.
Amazon.com. I'll put the link. If there's somewhere we can put the link is
already
like
in
this
the show notes.
But Amazon.com, it's entitled Behind My Stethoscope. And so you can just go on Amazon.com. It's available in Kindle version. It's available in paperback. And I think it's another 3 weeks and we'll have it available in Audible. So I'm very excited about that.
That's great. Yeah, congratulations. That's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited. And again, with the book, there's small individual chapters. You don't have to read it in any particular order. I hope you'll get the opportunity to read it. But more than anything, I hope that people who read it, that it helps and makes a difference.
That's great. So, well, the link is here in the Q&A, and it will also be in the show notes on our YouTube channel as well. In closing, if everyone listening today took one nugget of knowledge away from our discussion, what would you like it to be?
We are so thankful, folks, that y'all are out there. The experienced nurses, the long-term nurses, as a group, we're all in this together. As new nurses and people in nursing school, thank y'all so much for being a part of us. It's going to be hard. It's going to be stressful at times. I'll be honest, there were times that I wanted to quit. But sitting on top of 40 years, I absolutely love my job. I loved what I did. Parts of it were hard, but I want y'all to know that it's worth it. And that when you get burned out, when you hit those walls, there are other people around that's been there. We've been there, we know. But I want y'all to know, as you're coming through school and you're doing all that, we'll all work together. We'll figure out how to get through this together, because we're a team, and that's what we do, and we take care of each other. And I just want y'all to know that we've got this. You have got this. No matter what wall you hit, we're here. We're a team together. And again, it's not just us as nurses, but it's the whole group. And so thank y'all very much, and for joining nursing, and you're going to make it. You're going to be great. I'm so excited for you guys, and I'm really excited for us as well. You've got this, folks.
All right, Kim, thank you for joining us, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being the tribe, empowering each other, learning together, laughing together, and supporting one another. Never stop learning. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye, y'all.
Bye.